We have an interesting program this morning. Good morning. I'm Joyce Esty, WRNJ's news director, and welcome to Newsline. I'm the host of Newsline as well, and we like to bring you programs of local importance. So this morning, we're going to focus all on education. First part of the program this morning, we're going to be talking to two individuals that are going to help you sort of weed through the idea of putting your son or daughter, your high school student, and getting them settled into the right college, not just college or university, but the right choice, and they're going to help you with that. There are certain things that they feel are benchmarks that you need to understand when you're embarking on that process, and so we'll learn more about those. Are our first guests, and then a little later on, we're going to stick with that whole education thing, and we will be talking with the principal of the middle school in Alamuchi Township, as well as her social studies teacher, and they're going to be bringing 4 students here that have already been published with regard to their editorial writing. So we're going to learn a little bit more about how they have worked their curriculum into teaching students how to write critically, and that's in the second half of the program this morning. So stick around for that. But without further ado, I am being joined via the phone this morning by the co-founders of the College Benefits Research Group. And good morning, Steve Sirot.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Steve. And do you have Dave there? Dave Slater, are you also here?
I am here as well. Thank you, Joyce.
Okay, great. All right. Well, gentlemen, we all think that, the time to start looking at schools is once spring hits and maybe in their junior or senior year. But maybe you could give us an understanding, parents that have students that are in high school. When should we really start, thinking in terms of higher education for our son or daughter and what would work best for them? What's the time frame there?
Well, we believe in starting early, and you could, say it's probably right after you get that positive pregnancy test back. You better start thinking about college.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Okay, but you're not ready to go ahead and decide which college your soon-to-be newborn should be attending. You really want to focus on the 3 major areas of college planning, and we believe very strongly that they all should be focused on equally. That's the financial, academic, and social perspective when choosing colleges and guiding yourself through that process.
Okay.
So that really ramps up with the college search process in really early on in the junior year.
So I'm assuming, as the ink dries on the birth certificate, you're saying really there that you want them to start putting away a little bit of money a month, a year, whatever it is, whatever they can afford toward that college education. That's part of your plan, correct?
Yes, absolutely. If you've looked over the last 30 years and you see tuition inflation anywhere between 5 and 9% a year, if you haven't really started to save early, it's much harder to try to catch up later on. Mm-hmm. That's really what got David and I into the business, because our background was financial advisors, and we were very good if we started out a strong savings plan with a family when their kids were very young. But we had some challenges to how to really help people that had students that were already in high school, and now they're looking at this massive financial impact for the family, and they didn't really have any answers on how to deal with it. So once we started to learn how financial aid works and how to really position yourself best for that financial aid, or even merit-based aid, which colleges tend to give more money, and what they look for in students, we began to be able to really advise people on how to strategize to lower the cost of college and find that right college.
Because a lot of kids are sent to FAFSA. They have to fill that out, and they go down that road. And I also want to mention to those parents that are at home saying, I didn't do that from the time my child was born. I haven't been socking away money. Well, I understand, because when you're that young and you have a young family, you can't exactly afford to do that, really. I mean, it's great if you can, but not everybody can. And I would wager to say that most people can't.
So one of the things that we're very clear on is that parents who come to us don't have to have already done their financial plan. It's ideal if they start early, as Stephen says, because it just takes that much more money to get a kid through college. But the reality is that wherever your kid is and wherever you are when your student is ready to go off to college, we have to plan from that moment forward. And the biggest challenge that we have with students and parents is that they have unrealistic expectations of either the schools they want to apply to, and they have no budgetary constraints. So even though they may not have saved any money up through that point, they have these big price tag colleges that are out there, and nobody is really looking and scrutinizing how they're going to afford them, because the colleges and the government sometimes allow the parents to just borrow. And the borrowing allows them to pay without realizing that on the other end, these types of loans are going to be with them for many years to come, and they may not have the capacity to pay those on a monthly basis. So it's very important that parents and students get on the same page about what value is, what they're trying to accomplish, and what their capacity is for getting it done.
Yeah, you can't really put all your eggs in one or two baskets. You know, my son or daughter hoping they're going to be either a superstar academically or athletically and get a great scholarship. There's got to be. You really do have to have variables in that, and so when you're looking at this, what are some of the variables that they tell them? Is it going to maybe a community college first?
It's certainly an option for some people, but I think what most people look at when they say, well, it's got to be community college or go to, quote unquote, the lesser college because it doesn't cost as much, that's just not the way it is in reality so much. The fact is, for community college, it's the right path academically and socially for many students.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And so... but if it's not right and it's just the financial driving that family there, then they should do a little bit more digging, because we've been able to really help people find ways to afford the right college. You shouldn't have to sacrifice getting the experience that student needs to be ready to work in the world and be successful when they're done with college, just because the numbers are driving those choices. There's 4,000 schools out there, and if you ask the typical person to name 50, they probably have a tough time. So it doesn't mean that the other 3,950 schools are bad. It's just that the way colleges market themselves, people buy into that if it's not this $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 school, then my son or daughter will not have a chance to really get to where they should be in life. It's not true. It's being oversold. It's a lot about marketing. So you've got to take the hype out. You start to really have to look at the schools and what your options are in a reasoned way. And when you do that, many times people will find that their choices were a whole lot better than they thought they were when they first started the process.
Well, has a lot to do with it. Is such a broad scope of what a person has to choose from. And you mentioned all these colleges, certainly, and then there's this whole plethora, this world that you're looking at. What do I want to do with the rest of my life? And you're at a very young age to be making that kind of mammoth decision. So yeah, I totally advocate going to a community college, get your 2-year degree there, and then let's talk, because you've had some experiences beyond high school, and you're starting to see what the great big world offers you.
By the way, it's not just that you should do it from an academic and a social, financial fit, which is the three that we focus on, but we also need to guide the students to understand what is at stake for them. Too many of the high schools, their goal of the high school is to get into college, and people see it as a destination. You're not living in college for the rest of your life. It better be for a limited period of time, otherwise you'll go broke. And also, you're not getting fed at college. Nobody's going to give you a job for the rest of your life unless you're becoming an academic. So how do you get the student to be aware of what the measured goals are, not just to get a degree, but how do they use that experience in college to be not just ready for the rest of the world, but positioned and actually in a job or in a graduate program when they get out.
Right. Well, that's why
too many students are not even focused, so they come back and they sit on their parents' couch and go, "Now what, Mom?" as though this was supposed to have been part of the growing up experience.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what that school's problem.
That's
right.
We're paying.
I'm sorry. I don't know what that school's problem is. They haven't gotten me a job yet, and that there is that attitude. You're 100% right. I think internships, as a result of that, are just key with students as soon as you can to get an internship, get your foot in the door. One thing, but also to understand whether or not that's the path you really want to go in.
For sure. And when you talk about internships, it's interesting. We've been privileged to be at some schools that have a lot of resources that they could bring to bear to help a student find internships and be on a track to even getting jobs when they're done. University of Delaware, we got to get to know that school pretty well, and their career development department. And they said something very interesting that definitely stuck with us. They work very hard. And not all schools do this, but they work very hard in establishing relationships with companies and also in the public sector so that they could create opportunities for people to get internships through those relationships or even get job opportunities once they graduate. And one of the things they said to us is, when do you think most students walk into the Career Placement Center office?
Yeah.
And I said, probably when they're seniors. He said, yes, spring of their senior year. Now, if I've worked so hard to develop a relationship with this telecommunications company, am I going to send them someone that I don't really know that well and I'm not that confident in that they'll work out? I said, no, I guess I wouldn't. So if somebody has come to me when they're a freshman and talked about what they're taking in school and what their interests are, and I've got to know them through the years, I could feel much more confident recommending them for a particular position. And those are the students that I'm sending for those opportunities. So we always recommend that while the students and families are looking for schools, they really see what the career placement office has to offer, and then once they're there, they don't be a stranger. They get involved early.
Okay, excellent. Think of them. They should be thinking of themselves as a corporation that they need to market and move along. We've got to take a break here, but we are talking with Steve Sirot as well as Dave Slater, and they are the co-founders of the College Benefits Research Group. They're saying that the three main things that you need to have when your student is looking at colleges: know if it's a good academic fit, social fit, and financial fit. We've got lots more to discuss with them. Please stay tuned.
Keeping you in touch with people who make the news. Now, back to Newsline with Joyce Esty on WRNJ.
Thanks for staying with us. We're talking with the co-founders of the College Benefits Research Group, Dave Slater and Steven Sirot, and we've been talking about a number of things, not the least of which is what school's a good fit for your student. It's great if you started planning for this from the day that they were born, but for those of us that sort of wake up to the idea once they hit high school, these guys really have some interesting insights as to what we need to know. Now, your three categories: academic, we talked about that a little bit. Obviously, the student has to really come up to snuff and make sure that they're doing all that they can with their studies. Social, though, you mentioned that. We talked about financial and academic. Social. How what's the social fit that we're talking about here?
Very interesting, because people think that academics are the primary reason why a student is not successful at a school. It's not true. It's actually the social fit. And that's something that is unfortunately, not focused on enough during the college selection process. A student will say, I want a very large school, for example. Why? Because there's so much to offer, and I love sports and, all these different clubs and lots of different things that I could study academically. But you know what? It depends on their personality. Because if you're at a very large state school, it's really up to you to go out and seek out what they have to offer, get involved, and really dive in. You better have that type of personality, because if you're somebody who, what we call them, test the water type of a student, where you wait to see what opportunities come to you, nobody's going to find you in that type of environment. You'll sit in your dorm room, and your parents will get a call on Thanksgiving saying, well, I just don't fit in here. I'm just not happy. And you could hear it. They probably would have been better off at a mid-sized or smaller school where, you know what, you could try to hide, but they're going to find you. I like to pick on one of my favorite schools is Muhlenberg, because it's a smaller school in Pennsylvania, but they don't let kids fall through the cracks. They find them, they make sure they're engaging, involved, and being supported in the way that they need. So that's just one example, but it could be, is it very active in Greek life? Is that how the social scene works? It could be political. It just could be a cultural difference. A lot of the kids here from the Northeast romanticize about going to a southern school and just not realizing that the speed is different, the way that they think is a little bit different. I joke around saying they're too nice. Will somebody go ahead and insult me once in a while because I'll feel like I'm more like back in the Northeast. So that's definitely a key. The social is a big part of it.
And I know here in New Jersey, we have what we call a brain drain, where a lot of kids are leaving the state. They're going to school elsewhere and not coming back. Mm. And that's a real problem. Go ahead.
It's an interesting point. And the other part of the social aspect of it that people don't think about, and this is unfortunately another reason why students do come home, is that they romanticize about the idea of going far away because they don't want to be too close. They're afraid they're going to bump into people that they know, which is kind of ironic. When you do see somebody, you can't wait to go and say hi to them because you haven't seen anybody you know. But what if you're from the Northeast and you decide you want to go to California? Well, many times students haven't figured out they don't have a support structure in California. They don't know anybody in California. So when holidays come about, they haven't budgeted that they've got to come back and forth. Maybe they can only afford to come back once. Well, what are they supposed to do when the campus shuts down over Christmas or over a holiday? Mm-hmm. What are they supposed to do if they are sick? What are they supposed to do? And very often, students who go out to these places, not just they don't come back after they've graduated. Sometimes they come back because they can't stand being away from home, which is the irony because that's why they wanted to leave in the first place.
I had my first one was exactly that. That is exactly why he wanted to go and spread his wings and fly. And once he did, he was back before the end of the year.
And now what do you do with a student? And this is a big issue. What do you do with a student who no longer has the high school grades to show for themselves? They've been away. Maybe they weren't happy, which usually doesn't bode well for
academia, right?
And now you have to go back out and try to repackage this student to go to another place. And what does their resume look like now? Not so good. So you have a lot of and not for nothing. If they didn't do really well, maybe not all of their credits are going to transfer. So now what have you just done? Extend college beyond the cost of 4 years, maybe to a fifth or a sixth year, because maybe the credits are not going to transfer over because, they have calculus with an E at the end of it because it's a special school. Are you kidding me? They don't accept that credit. So what are you supposed to do? Now you have to redo. And that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, well, it can. That is very true. And I know when it happened, it was salvageable when it happened to us. But we did lose a lot in the transfer. You're right there. You do lose a lot. Before our time is so fleeting, and there's so much to glean from both of you. Online courses. What are you thinking there? How do you measure that?
Not a big fan of online colleges, but it's definitely a huge trend that many schools are implementing online courses, okay? And some very big-name schools are doing it. And, everyone has a different learning style, right? I like the classroom environment. You could discuss things. There's eye contact, all that stuff. And you lose some of that when it's done online. But at the same time, it could be a good way to try to make sure that student fits in some of those requirement classes that they'll need to stay on track for a 4-year degree. So it's definitely a big trend. It's a big way that colleges are looking to save money. And if that translates into helping control costs of college a little bit, then that'll be a welcome development. But not a huge fan of the total online schools. And if you look at the graduation rates at those online schools, they are abysmal.
Oh, really?
So it's got a way to go.
Well, that's self-motivation as
there
opposed
is something that's very important to add to that, because you're touching on something that maybe you weren't thinking of, but it relates back to our earlier conversation. Students, if they want to keep on track for a 4-year school and a 4-year degree, can supplement the school's requirements either in online or community colleges,
right,
which will allow them to make up or to take classes that they need to focus on when they have a little extra time so that they can keep up their GPAs. They may not be able to have that factor in as a GPA weight, but they certainly can get credits. And you have to make sure, and this is important, that the school will accept the credits from the place that you're taking your schooling. A lot of people take AP courses in high school and are surprised to find out that the school that they're going to doesn't accept any of them. Mm-hmm. So now what do?
This is true.
You've just done all this work, and it doesn't show up as a value on the other side.
Guys, if you could give me a Reader's Digest, if you will, timeline as to what parents need to be doing at this time of year or in the beginning of January with their student, looking down the road for a junior, say in high school, and the prospects of their going to school. What kind of things should they be doing right now?
Two things, and one relates to building that initial list of schools to start working with. And we use what's called a top-down approach to doing so. So we're not focused on the names of schools at all. We're focused on what's a good fit for this student, what's their values, what's their skills, their interests, and let's look to the schools that fit their criteria and not focused on names, but rather on attributes. That builds a broader list. You could have 30, 40 schools to start with, right? My son's a senior, and I know this scares people when I tell them this, but last year when we built our initial list, we had 82 schools, right?
Wow.
But it was a broad list, and we were able very quickly to narrow that down to about 25, and now he applied to 13. And every one of the schools on his list is a school that we feel very confident that there's value, there's a good academic fit, definitely social potential fit, and definitely financial potential fit. And when you do it from the top-down approach, you don't limit your choices. You arrive at a much better list. On the other side, now is the perfect time for parents to start thinking about how are they going to plan financially. Right? Mm-hmm. What do they have? Where do they have it? How will that translate to what kind of financial aid they may be able to receive? And I know too many people say, I'll never be able to qualify. And it's not true. There's a lot more financial aid out there than people are aware of. And you definitely want to do that examination now. It's also just knowing the rules of the game. Some assets count towards what they think you could pay, and some don't. Okay? So you want to know how it's all going to play out. That's what we're really actively doing with our students' parents as early as they come to us.
Do you have a website where people can learn more?
Tons of resources on our website. They could learn a ton. It's www.cbrg.info. On there, they could see videos and lots of things that we've put out there, links to tons of resources that are helpful in finding a college or figuring out how to afford a college. It could also see our free workshop schedule. We do workshops around the area that are, thank God, very well received. People love them. They're free. They're educational. And anyone that wants could come and learn a little bit more if they want to come.
Okay, the website again is www.cbrg.org?
.info.
.info, okay.
Yep.
Okay, very good. We are over time, but you've been really a whirlwind of information, and I do appreciate that. I thank you both for joining us this morning, both Dave and Steve, and co-founders of the College Benefits Research Group. Check out their website, www.cbrg.info. Thanks, guys.
Joyce, thank you so much.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
When we return, we're going to be tuning into what is going on in the Alamuchee School District. We have a lot to hear about from their 4